Hi, my name's Nick Allen. I'm president of the HEMA Club at VCU, and today we're going to talk about tail. Now, tail is the last in these series of secondary guards that we've been doing, and some people think it's actually one of the most useful. What it looks like is you take Fool in the front, and you turn it all the way around 180 degrees so that the sword is actually pointing behind you. This is when that loose grip we talked about earlier is really important, because if you try to have a really tight grip on it, there's no way that this guard's going to work on either side. You have to have that really nice loose grip on the pommel, so that here I'm almost palming it like this when it's on this side, and definitely when it's on this side, because your arms cross in this weird way like this, especially with heavy gloves. You really just resting your thumb on it. That's just an important thing to note. So there are 3 transfers for this one. It's a bit like Vomtag, just in reverse. We're going to go the Unterhau, then Mittelhau, and then the Oberhau. The Unterhau, you're going to drop the tip down, and it's going to come up in this nice diagonal cut into ox, and then you're just going to carry it all the way back down to the tail on the left side. This is a bit awkward, and this is what I see most people have problems with when they first start it. Just try to have loose fingers and make it work on this side. And then when you're going from left to right, same thing, comes up, and that nice cut, and it comes down. An important thing to note is that we're cutting with the true edge on this blade, because when we're cutting up, that's the edge that's most readily available. The next one is the Mittelhau, which is where you are starting from tail, and then you move it in this sweep. Notice how I'm cutting with the false edge on this one. But that's an important distinction, because tail, this is when some of those false edge cuts become really important, especially if you're doing some weird other cuts from tail. False edge and true edge become really important, and that's why this guard can be very useful and versatile. So the Mittelhau with the false edge from right to left, and then from left to right. Same with the false edge. Notice how my knuckles are towards the ground during this cut, and then it comes into tail. The last one is the Oberhau, and most people think you come this way. You actually cut with the false edge. The point comes up, and then it comes down like this. It's a weird angle, but it's very useful. So notice how my knuckles are towards the ceiling, and my thumb is towards the back wall as it cuts down into tail. Same thing when you're coming from left to right. The point comes up, and you're actually going to be cutting like this, which is a weird angle, as I've said, but think about how useful it will be when, say, you're on the same side as your opponent, and you manage to cut this way. That's a much faster motion and more direct than trying to bring it up and then bring it back down. So the transfers for this one are going to look like this. It's going to be the Unterhau, and then the Mittelhau, and then the Oberhau with the false edge. And then you do that on both sides, going forwards and backwards. This is, like I've said, a very versatile guard. So let's take a look at that. So if we're starting on the right side, it looks like this. Unterhau, Unterhau, Mittelhau with the false edge, Mittelhau, Oberhau with that false edge, Oberhau with the false edge. Moving backwards, Unterhau, Unterhau, Mittelhau, Mittelhau, Oberhau, Oberhau. Let's take a look at that from the side. So notice how I'm keeping this sword at almost a perpendicular angle towards me. I'm not trying to angle it out like this, and I'm certainly not trying to angle it behind me like that. That's an important note. Make sure that it's just nice and solid at your side. So it looks like this on the right side. Oberhau. Sorry, Unterhau. Mittelhau with the false edge. Mittelhau. Oberhau with that false edge. Oberhau. Going backwards. Unterhau. Unterhau. Mittelhau. Mittelhau. Oberhau. Oberhau. The last thing that I want to point out with tail is that your sword is directly back behind you, which means that the point isn't online and presenting an active threat to your opponent. That's something to be aware of. If you hang out in tail and your opponent is in, let's say, long point, it's very easy for them to stab you, and they might be able to get it before you can get into position. The last thing to note is that it's it can be difficult to try and deflect things like thrusts because you have to bring your blade from back here all the way up to here, which can be a very difficult motion under stress. This is a fantastic move when you want to press the advantage and when you want to be sneaky with your opponent. It's one of my favorites for handling drills because you can do a wide variety of cuts and angles that we'll look at in later videos. That's the basics of tail. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you guys later.